Mommy made me mash my M&Ms.
One more time.
Mommy made me mash my M&Ms. Mommy made me mash my M&Ms. Choir.
All right.
Like,
And we're live on air. Hey.
hello.
Welcome everyone to Integrated Rhythm. Two swing dancing besties navigating the world of Afro-centric social dancing. I'm one of your hosts, Bobby White.
And I am the other, Chisomo Selemani. Excuse my fogging glasses. I'm just so excited about this moment. So excited.
Integrated Rhythm with Chisomo and Bobby.
All right. So what are we doing here? What are we doing here?
What are we doing here, Bobby? What did you rope me into, friend?
I'm really so excited. If you don't know about us, my name is Bobby White. I am an swing dance instructor of Balboa and Lindy Hop and solo jazz. And I write some stuff for swungover.com. Swungover.com is a blog that I do where I just talk about kind of all things dancing history and the modern scene and that sort of stuff. And yeah, so that's kind of what I do.
And it's super cool. All of your work has inspired many and educated many. So we're very grateful for your contributions.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
But I do think that something that we're going to talk about probably a lot in this series is like, what it means to be a historian, especially a historian of Black art forms.
Yeah.
And, the things that we can do well and the things that we cannot do so well, of which I've done both. And so I think that'll be a really fun and interesting part of the thing. And I think I'll learn a lot.
Yeah, I love that. I think so here's the thing: is you're a historian, you're an educator, and as an educator myself, and I'm about to introduce myself. What I love about our approach to things is that we are lifelong learners. We're really our hope is to continue to grow and to learn. We're not in a fixed space. So I appreciate that about you, and I find learning so exciting. So I'm Chisomo Selemani. I'm an associate professor of communication sciences and disorders, although you're probably not going to hear too much about speech pathology. I have some nuggets I might throw in here and there. But I am more of a local, regional, sometimes national swing dance instructor, African dancer specific to South Central African styles. I'm from Zambia, so I like to remind people that Africa is not a monolith. And there are how many countries in Africa? 54. You got that right. So regardless of what I teach, I usually like to remind people like, hey, there are 54 countries in Africa.
And Chisomo, does the 54 countries mean that there's only 54 cultures in Africa?
Oh, absolutely not. We know the answer to that. No. In Zambia alone, there are about 72 different tribal groups.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And we have 10 different provinces that roughly correlate to the number of language groups. So we, depending on who you're talking to, you might hear people either say that there's 72 different languages or 72 different dialects, but that's reflective of the cultural diversity, the indigenous cultural diversity, and not to mention that we have international and racial and ethnic diversity in Zambia as well. So that is one of the 54 countries. And Zambia's not as big as some of the other ones. So Africa is quite big. And so I'm passionate about African things and Afro-centric things, which also leads to swing dancing. And
hey,
yeah.
In case you didn't know, swing dancers is an African-based dance form from Black American culture.
Yes. Important facts. I feel like we might need to say that again. It is from African American culture. It's really important to remember that. So, Bobby and I are also we work together dance wise. We're partners, so we're
Yeah.
besties and partners, and
Yeah.
so we have that perspective as well, which is really great. um I
Yeah.
know.
By the way, I'm so excited about this project. By the way, in case you can't hear it in my voice, I'm really excited about this project.
I just adore you and the person that you are, and so I'm very grateful to be a part of this as well. Yes, you're
Oh.
welcome, listeners and viewers. You're welcome. Welcome to.
Chisomo, where are you calling from today?
I'm calling from Cleveland. For those of you who can see me, you can see my Cleveland shirt. I'm repping my Cleveland pride, my Cleveland people. You know who you are. I love you so much.
OH.
Cleveland. But so that might be confusing to you. You might be like, your name is Chisomo. You sound very American, but yet you're talking about Zambia and you live in Cleveland. What is the truth? The truth is this: I am Zamerican. I'm both Zambian and American. That's the way we respond to that. My passport is green. I'm a Zambian citizen. But I've lived a long time in the United States, so got two homes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Bobby, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Brooklyn. As anyone who's lived in Brooklyn might soon realize when you hear various ambulances or people partying out in the streets, it's Friday night that when we're recording this, and that's usually then I live in a Caribbean neighborhood, and that's when a lot of partying goes down. So that might come into the microphones. Don't worry, it's all part of the atmosphere that we want to create and support anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
New York. Yes. I love it. And so there were a couple of things that Bobby and I wanted to talk about this as we get started.
Yeah, just kind
So
of set the stage for a lot of the things that kind of overall what this is going to be about, so you can see if you want to keep listening in the future, and also I'll maybe kind of lay a little bit of groundwork for some of the things that are definitely going to come up.
mhm. Yes, absolutely.
So,
So did you want to tell them our first point?
oh, I'm sorry. No, you can tell them I didn't mean to
No.
step over you.
No, you were perfect. You're fine. No, I was just going to say that this is an imperfect journey, and
Yes, I
yeah.
almost forgot the imperfect journey point, which is just a to further reinforce the imperfections that are possible. Yes, yeah, something that's really huge for us is that we're going to be making mistakes, and I'm going to be awkward. Period. And it also happens that I'm a white guy talking about a lot of race stuff, and so I'm going to be particularly awkward, I'm sure, at a lot of times. And it's really important for us to be comfortable making mistakes because, as Chisomo says,
It's an imperfect journey, and we're allowed to make mistakes. You need to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I have a little ditty that it's a shout out to one of my other besties, Caitlin Woman. Making it weird and awkward. That is what we do. What we do, Caitlin. So yeah, we it's important for us to embrace discomfort and also recognize that people will make mistakes, but we're about calling in and growing, reflecting and growing because we want to
yeah,
become better. So yeah.
I love the way that from the very beginning, Chisomo was like, this needs to be about calling people in versus calling people out. So a culture of restorative justice. We want to cultivate change by that calling in versus that calling out, and we recognize that calling out has its place. However, you may not see that represented here in this podcast. Those
Yeah.
are the words of Chisomo that I read back from a document. So.
In one of our meetings slash hangouts slash planning sessions. But yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Slash karaoke parties.
Yeah, one of our karaoke parties. No joke. Bobby and I mean, to display a little bit of vulnerability and honesty, Bobby and I just got these mics. And so I think it was like just a little bit ago, we were 48 hours ago, we were having a very good time hanging out with our microphones.
And that's something I want. That's something I would love for viewers to kind of imagine in their heads while while you're listening to this podcast, and probably all podcasts, especially those who are done by people who are not yet professional podcasters or haven't had a whole lot of experience doing that. Is that being able to have a good conversation with a friend, on on your couch at night with a glass of wine is one thing, but being able to have that same conversation with your friend with a microphone in your face and a Zoom camera in your face, and knowing that everyone's going to hear every single word, anyone can just hear anything that you say, that that's another reason why we're probably going to make mistakes and be awkward sometimes.
Yes, and seeing as this is our pilot episode, you're welcome. You get to view our journey, or hear our journey. So yeah, Bobby, what is our next point?
Well, something that counter narratives.
Oh yes.
How our hope is to elevate narratives that will help us interrogate within ourselves. Did I read that right? I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No, you're
help us
so right.
interrogate.
It's so funny. I feel like people who know me will listen to this and be like, "Those were totally yes." Chisomo definitely wrote that. So yeah, our hope is to elevate counter narratives, to elevate narratives. Like there's, we were just talking earlier about Chimamanda Adichie and her TED Talk, "A Danger of a Single Story," and in it she really talks about the importance of storytelling and hearing multiple perspectives. And so, especially as we reflect on our history and this particular moment in time, we need to think about the stories that we encounter. And oftentimes, stories from marginalized perspectives are not readily available to us. And so, in our podcast, the different people we're interviewing have wonderful stories that can teach us lessons. And so our hope is to elevate those stories and to provide these narratives and counter narratives to help us interrogate within ourselves our sense of reality, and our sense of justice, and kind of move the dial forward for ourselves. So yeah.
So that's what you're going to hear a lot of in this podcast, is lots of interviews with especially people of color in the swing dance, jazz dance, modern scene, to get their story and to hear their story. And something that's going to be a part of it for Chisomo and I is we each obviously have our own really special place and perspective in the world based on where we grew up and our skin color. So for instance, for me as a white guy instructor, something that is something I have to it's something I think about, and it's something that is on my mind a lot, is this concept of virtue signaling. To what extent am I virtue signaling? And that's a long and interesting soul searching process for you to think about, because it's really natural for humans to virtue signal, right? Like we're social creatures, and we want to let our fellow people that we love and admire know that we have certain morals, and that we uphold certain beliefs. And of course, it's easy sometimes to do those things without putting in the background work, or it's easy to do those things insincerely just for that social capital. And so like that's something that is going to be a part of my process going through this, and is that concept of a white guy instructor doing these kinds of things, is that virtue signaling.
Yeah.
And that's a question that I'm constantly asking myself, and other people might have different answers.
Yeah. And along with that is this concept of performative allyship, right? So there's the very real products of people doing the work and asking questions and engaging and developing meaningful relationships, not just to mine stories, but to get to know more about the world around them, and elevate voices, right? To have a more complete picture of humanity. There's the products of that. And then there's um, the the similar looking experience when someone desires to look virtuous and desires to be perceived as somebody who's doing the right thing. And so that can be it's a really a lot of the conversations that we're going to have are nuanced, and we particularly love our vantage point because, as Bobby said, we're coming from these different racial perspectives, hence the integrated part of integrated rhythm. And so these are very nuanced conversations that have a variety of different perspectives and answers associated with them. And so, yeah. So, Bobby, I absolutely love your journey. And I love that the fact that you ask questions and you also lay yourself bare and vulnerable to your people who know you, to and you say, hey, what am I doing and how is this being perceived? So I'd say in the scene in particular, and thinking about the swing dancing scene, I have really appreciated how you've navigated some things, because a lot of people have no idea the degree to which you have done versus various things in the scene, how the degree to which you've supported people and helped nurture and elevate voices. And so I personally feel really lucky to know you. So,
Oh, well, thanks. And I can't tell the listeners out there how much I appreciate and love Chisomo as such a great friend. It was pretty striking how quickly, well, for those of you who know Chisomo, it's probably not surprising how quickly one can become comfortable talking to Chisomo. And it was just, yes, I've been very, very fortunate to have friends like Chisomo in my life to help me on my journey.
yeah. So,
And I do not ever want to take advantage of that.
mm,
So those are some of my, just a few of the myriad of white guy problems that are probably going to come up in this series. But that's what we're here for, right? That's what we're here for. We're here to get comfortable talking about these uncomfortable topics. So Chisomo, as a Black woman, what expectations are you kind of dealing with as we go into this
yeah.
journey together?
Yeah. I mean, permission to get very real right now.
Permission granted.
Permission granted. Actually, well, we knew I was going to get very real regardless, but this week has been an interesting week. Regardless of when you hear this, just to put a little bit of a frame for you in this conversation, our conversation is happening within days of the verdict associated with Breonna Taylor. And I've spoken to a few a few women who identify as Black or African American, and being a woman who is perceived as African American, who is African American, and is who I strongly identifies as Black. Um, it's it's a hard time right now, and particularly in the scene, if we're talking about swing dancing in particular, there's this interesting interaction between invisibility and need for education. And so in society in general, and recognizing that swing dancing is essentially like a small glimpse of society, right? It's a sampling of society. So the issues that we have in greater society are definitely seen in swing dancing, and then like punctuated whenever we're discussing race and kind of challenging existing perspectives. Um, it it can be really taxing and exhausting, because we're expected to, as Black women, be people who can support change and who can educate everybody and who can be nurturing and loving and kind of the mamas. But then we're often jettisoned, we're often cast aside and disregarded. And so, and we see that with when we think about the greater picture related to Breonna Taylor. Um, there are many I speaking of convoluted and nuanced, there's a lot of things going on that conversation. But I know that there are many people who are disheartened right now, and I am as well. Like, it's it's hard. It's hard thinking about how other people perceive you, and think, and recognizing that there are many people that may not value your life. And so but yet those same people want things from you. So um it's an interesting perspective. I love to talk, as Bobby knows. I am a speech pathologist, after all. I I enjoy using my voice and giving other people voices. Um, so I'm usually up for talking and educating and engaging in conversations and engaging in the hard work of calling in. But I'm also tired, and I know there are a lot of people who are tired. So I think it'll be interesting as we talk. Like Bobby was saying, we have some white boy problems and we have some black girl problems going on here that we'll kind of confront and think about. But we also have black joy, and we also have friendship and joy and grace and all of these wonderful things available to us too. So we'll talk about some challenging things, but also, like, we'll have some fun along the way. So yeah.
All right. I think it's time for us to take a really quick break. So you're going to hear some words from some advertisers.
Hey, y'all. We love doing this podcast. We love our work here at Integrated Rhythm. It is free, capital FREE. In order to keep us on air, though, we would love some donations. So feel free to give whatever your heart desires. Remember that half of this podcast is 100% an artist. So keep that in mind.
We understand times are rough, so if you don't got anything to give, it's okay. Please enjoy and keep listening to our show. If you do have a little something you can kick at us, we will greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate it. You can send that PayPal to robertwhiteiii at gmail.com. That's robertwhiteiii at gmail.com. Or you can Venmo at Bobby Swung Over. That's Venmo at Bobby Swung Over, all one word. Please put the note IR in that caption somewhere. Like when it says, you can add a note. Pop in a little IR for Integrated Rhythm so that we know it's for the podcast. That will help us steer the funds appropriately. And once again, we thank you so much and we appreciate you so much.
Hello, you just heard some commercials. But guess what? We're going to tell you where to shop. You should shop BIPOC. That stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color.
That's right. So, for instance, let's say you want a mask. You need a new mask. It's fall. You want something that has colors that will match all that you got going on.
Yeah.
You know what you should do is you should check out something like DIOP or DIOP. You could say it probably in different ways, but it's DIOP, and that is a company that is diaspora-inspired streetwear.
And you should particularly check out the section that says, who can wear this? There are lots of questions about clothing made from Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Check out their who can wear this section and get and educate yourself.
It's really fantastic. So that's DIOP, weardiop.com.
Integrated Rhythm with Chisomo and Bobby.
All right, so it's if you can see Chisomo, if you're watching the video, Chisomo's skin has this gorgeous tone to it, these layers of beautiful coloring. This was not there the other night when we did the test because
No.
electronics are racist, and this is something that I'm now so aware of. Do you mind explaining a little bit why electronics are racist or what's going on there?
Yeah. So there are a couple different things. There's actually a whole notion called algorithmic bias. So if you have a moment, you should check that out. But let's talk about my computer specifically, right? As Bobby was saying, I have to like wiggle my computer, especially when lighting is not great. And when I say lighting is not great, I mean a room is illuminated. Like
Yeah,
when we
yeah. I crawl out of bed, I turn on a light, and my computer looks like I'm in, a really well lit talk show.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was not the same. It's not the same for Chisomo.
It's not the same for me at all. And what's if you can't see us, you can see kind of if you look at my wall, you see that it's a white wall or it's a little bit beige. If you look at Bobby's wall, similar, beige, white. So we're talking about bright walls, it's lit, but my computer doesn't always recognize my face. And when computer technology was developed, when camera technology was developed, it wasn't developed for Black people. Actually, you can see if you watch the TV show Insecure, they use specific strategies to capture black skin, like, or melanated skin, darker skin tones, because regular cameras do not work well for us. And so when we think about racism, something that I think about is proximity to whiteness. And so people might be like, well, but I what well, think about the fact that tights haven't always been available for darker skin tones. Think about the fact that band-aids haven't always been available for darker skin tones. Like, there's just so many things about life that autopilot don't consider darker skin, and cameras
Yeah.
are like a prime example of this. Bobby, what were you going to say?
I remember very distinctly, as soon as I think I was, if I recall correctly, I was reading Whistling Vivaldi, which was recommended to me by Chisomo, which
Yeah.
we may do an episode on. We may do, by the way, we may do some book review episodes where we read a really cool book and
Yeah.
talk it out.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that I think it was after reading that book, I just so happened to be taking a run to the drugstore. And in the drugstore, I asked myself, what in this room would speak to a Black person?
Oh.
And so I went and looked at all the labels of like your like first aid creams, all the like bandages, all your ankle braces, all those pictures were like pretty much every single one of them was a white skinned person. And it was just one of those times where I was like, oh wow, I mean I haven't gone through and looked at every picture in a drugstore before,
Yeah.
but doing that very very clearly showed that that space just is comfortable for whiteness.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that there was just recently a medical book published by a person who I believe identifies as Black or African American, because while he was in med school, he couldn't find pictures of various like rashes, conditions on darker toned skin. The pictures that he came across were all only of lighter complected people, white people. And so I mean, when we talk about this happened like it's
And
I
that's
know.
just not feeling welcome in a drugstore. That's like getting, misdiagnosed in a doctor's office.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, because certain skin conditions do appear differently on my skin as compared to yours, and so actually, there are times when I'll have something going on. I might be having a hypochondriac moment. I'm like, oh no, what's going on? And so I specifically Google search like black skin eczema or whatever, like black skin psoriasis, so I can see, because if I'm comparing a lighter, like a much lighter shade to my skin, like it's not the same kind of information. And granted, I should just be going to the doctor versus trying to self-diagnose. So friends, go to your uh trained healthcare professionals. But I mean, there is this other notion. I mean, if we want to continue to go down this road, like the healthcare system and Black people, and as a member of the healthcare system, as a licensed speech therapist, I am in it. So I appreciate my healthcare providers. I appreciate physicians and um, all the people who are working in Medicare in medicine. There are some things, some biases that we all have to deal with and confront. And one of the things we might end up talking about is pain and our understanding of pain as it pertains to people who identify as Black or African American. That is a very real thing. Um, there there's a research article as early as late as 2016 with really interesting information about our pain and what we think about with Black people. So anyway,
The when you mentioned uh, the thing that led us to talk about like the cameras are designed for the majority of skin tones, or the drugstore is designed for the majority of people that in at least in westernized European culture are light skinned people.
yeah,
It made me something that I think we're going to talk a lot about, or something that's a really important part of the Lindy Hop scene and the swing scene in general, Balboa scene, all of it, is understanding what majority means, especially in the sense of such a strong majority, by which I mean, like, if we take general American culture, 13, 14% Black Americans in our culture, means that, crap, I should have done the math earlier. Please bear in mind I'm a theater major before you hear these.
I would like to go on the record saying that neither of us is a math expert. So if our math is ever wrong, I am a college professor and I am honest with my students, and I tell them all the time, not great at simple math. I'm getting better at saying I'm not good at math because I'm a Black woman, so I shouldn't continue to throw that out in the atmosphere. But please, once again, grace. Give us some grace with some numbers. Some grace.
and
I think you
and
got some
Chisomo
grace.
has given me the perfect amount of time to work it out here on my phone calculator. So if you're looking at 80, that means 86, 87%. Um, you know, the majority in the swing scene, what that means is that if 13% of the people try to fight for their fair rights, and 86, 87% of that community hasn't experienced those things that they're experiencing, then how is that 13% going to make get their demands met for that fairness? How are they going to reach those goals of equality if without help from the majority? And in the swing dance scene's case, especially, since the swing dance scene is one of those places where, in all honesty, if you're not on board with this, what are you doing here? Like, you're listening to Black American music, you're dancing art forms that are either Black American invented or heavily Black American inspired, not just by actual Black Americans, but also by the Black American artistic values that are in the music that you're dancing to. If you're not on board with this, then I don't know what to tell you, aside from maybe choose a different dance or a different art form. If you're not here to help switch, help the minority get to their due place of fairness and respect in the scene.
Yeah, so I have two thoughts I'd like to share. One, I want to talk about the concept of minoritized, right? So this is in my diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice journey. There are moments where we have upgrades in our glossary of terms, and something I've been thinking about a little bit more is this idea of marginalized and minoritized. Um, when we, as Bobby just said, when we think about the majority, there's majority perspective, there's majority as in like actual number, um, and majority culture. And so one of the questions that we've asked ourselves, one of the questions that Bobby's asked is like, how many people who exist in the majority culture do you need to kind of like offset the balance if you get into a space otherwise marginalized perspectives or minoritized perspectives, right? And so, and those perspectives are minoritized because they're often given less preference, less space to exist. And so, um, I've had people ask, like, "Oh, well, if you're in a space that's majority Black, like as we would say in our common vernacular, like if you're in a Black space, um, are they still the minority because they're majority?" Well, they're no longer the minority. We're no longer the minority in that case, but our perspective is still minoritized when we think about the greater perspective and the greater culture, and it's still vulnerable. Um, and so we've heard sometimes people say, like, why are you bringing politics into dance? Like, dance is the one space, right, where we can come together and be joyful and have fun. And while we can all find this as a source of joy, um, there the way that this came to be was actually through the marginalization of people. And so are there's this wonderful resilient racial and ethnic group that has managed to keep alive and keep embodied within them the way that they move and dance and enjoy. And so for us to not honor that, and take a moment to appreciate and recognize our muses and where this inspiration is coming from, particularly those of us who love jazz dancing, swing dancing of all kinds. Like it just seems like a failure to members of our community, you know? So I
Oh
agree with
yeah.
you, Bobby, with that question of like, what are we doing? And some people might find that harsh. I know that there are people out there who are like, man, I'm just trying to have a good time. Like I work really hard and I don't want to like leave work and then come and have to deal with this like really hard thing. And I'm like, I my heart goes out to you. Like,
Well, yeah, like, uh, there's one difference between your beginner dancer coming in off of the street to your, free beginner lesson at your local dance. It is understandable that what they know about the dance is probably only what mass media has given them about the dance. That you do this thing to have fun, and you might even throw some people up in the air, and you wear some pretty swanky Gap, khakis while you do it. Like there are
Swanky khakis. Can we?
swanky.
Sorry.
So there are that they are understandably, they came to your dance because they're interested in this thing. The longer you are in the scene, uh, and in any art form that you do, even if it's as your kind of like release of energy from the stress of your work week, to understand what that art form meant to those who developed it is not just like respectful of the art form and respectful of the culture that did it, and respectful to you as a human being, from your own culture, who probably has things that are very serious and important to you that your culture has created, and that you would at least appreciate if people looked into that when they were doing your art form. So for me, like the an interesting thing about jazz dance and jazz music, and it's always been there, is that its very property of being celebratory or emotionally cathartic or joyful, those very properties in it make white people like myself think that it's there for the purpose of giving joy to yourself. It's there, it's that also that joy is a shallow level of joy. It's the level of joy that the Gap commercial dancers have on their faces while they're dancing in their khakis, right? And I use a humorous statement, and to maybe I hyperbolize the shallowness of that, but I do think a lot of swing dancers alive today, even very serious ones who've been around for a long time, I think a lot of them actually do think of the joyfulness of swing dancing, or swing dancing's existence as a tool for them to just have fun and be creative and artistic without thinking about where it came from, or what it's, where those things came from. I think it just allows that very property about jazz and jazz dance allows white people to take it for granted. Whereas exactly what Chisomo said, that we're dealing with an art form that came from a culture that has suffered immensely and yet continued to be joyful. We're talking about an art form invented by people who had their bodies and their lives controlled so much by the forces around them, such as the American government, such as enslavers, such as red line district planners, such as the average white person walking by the street will have the ability to control their bodies. For them to go and do this dance and have control over their own bodies, and to express themselves on their own terms, these things are just, when you think about what that meant to them in their lives and in their culture, then I don't think you can take the joy of swing dancing shallowly.
Right. Right. I've been thinking about the phrase that, as a Black person, I think specifically about being a Black woman. As a Black woman, being joyful is an act of defiance. And
Oh, I love that.
so, yeah,
I mean, I
it's
don't love that you have to do that,
that it
but
has
that's
to
a
be that
beautiful
way,
way of
yeah.
putting it.
But especially even in a time like right now, where there is collective grief and a sense of mourning, day after day, uh, it, finding joy is an act of defiance. It's an act of it's activism. And I've heard people say things like, "Why are we acting like it's the 1960s?" One thing I would like to say is that, well, one, I think the quietness of COVID has highlighted some things that have just been in existence for a really long time. So where we are isn't new. So there's that. We've just been able to like mute it or dumb it down, or like dial it down a little bit in the past. But now, because of COVID and the quiet, especially in April and March, April, and May, we're all at home, not able to go. So our focus is on the news and things that are happening outside of our house. And so there's this greater sense of awareness. And then beyond that, there have been some battles that were fought and won back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s that have been chipped away at. So even when we think about like voting, right, and people's access to voting, that has diminished over the years. And so there's some things, I believe that John Lewis, if you watch John Lewis's documentary, that's a good thing to watch. He talks a little bit about this. Like, we thought that we won some stuff, but then we're finding that we've lost ground. So if it feels like people are fighting for rights that were already won in the 1960s, it's because we are. It's because we're back there again.
Yeah.
And so, so I've gotten this sense from some of my friends who are um, a little bit more shy to engage, or who don't necessarily understand what all of this is about right now. I've gotten that sense of like, why are we here? But if we were to take a moment and look at legislature, if we were to take a moment and look at culture, we would see there's a reason why we're here there. And so it's important, if you don't know what we're talking about, to ask some questions. And we're not here to shame anybody, right? As Maya Angelou says, or as she said, when you know better, do better. So that's what we're about. We're about this journey of knowing a little bit better. Yeah.
I think that is a fantastic note to kind of end this episode on and to continue into our next episodes, which are going to start being our interviews with various voices, especially people of color in the scene or things involving race in the swing dance scene. And yeah, we hope you can join us.
Yeah, please do.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to Integrated Rhythm. We'd first off like to thank Tom Blair for his fantastic advice and Robots Radio Network for all of their support.
We would also like to thank Michelle Stokes and Laurel Ryan for their musical musings. Thank you so much for our introduction, our outro, and any sound things you hear in the middle that are really cool. That's them. We appreciate you.
And special thanks to Jessica Miltenberger for her enduring support, not only of this podcast and the inner workings thereof, but also as my wife.
And great gratitude goes out to our friends and family who are the shoulders that we lean on and the ears that we speak to. If you listen to this podcast, you're part of that, and we appreciate your enduring support.